The Epstein files just confirmed what we suspected for years. XRP was targeted. Coinbase was funded by Epstein. Gary Gensler was discussed in private emails before becoming SEC chair. But here is what nobody is telling you. The very people who tried to destroy XRP are now watching it become a federally regulated bank with direct access to the Federal Reserve, and they cannot stop it. Today I am breaking down exactly why their entire plan is collapsing and what this means for XRP holders in 2026. If you have been holding XRP through the lawsuit, through the FUD, through watching Bitcoin and Ethereum get a free pass while Ripple fought for its life, you know exactly how frustrating this has been. For 5 years, we were told XRP was a security. We were told Ripple would lose. We were told to sell, but you did not sell. And now the truth is finally coming out. The Epstein files revealed that back in 2014, Bitcoin insiders were actively working to destroy Ripple and XRP. They called us a threat. They said we would damage their ecosystem. They pressured investors to choose sides. And guess what? They failed. Today, XRP is trading around $2. Ripple settled the SEC lawsuit for 96% less than regulators demanded. XRP ETFs have pulled in over $1.14 billion, and Ripple just received conditional approval for a national bank charter. The enemy's lost. Now let me show you exactly why they are about to lose everything. Comment how many XRP you want to hold in 2026, and subscribe for all the latest XRP news updates. Let us start with what we now know. A 2014 email from Austin Hill, co-founder of Blockstream, was sent to a group that included Jeffrey Epstein, Reid Hoffman, and Joichi Ito from MIT Media Lab. In that email, Hill warned that Ripple and Stellar were threats to the Bitcoin ecosystem. He did not just criticize them, he actively pressured investors to withdraw support from anyone backing XRP. The email was titled, "Stellar is not so stellar," but the real target was clear. Ripple and XRP were the threat they feared most. David Schwartz, Ripple's former chief technology officer, responded publicly. He said the email proves that early Bitcoin insiders viewed XRP supporters as enemies, not competitors, enemies. He pointed out that Hill was using investment allocation as leverage. If you supported Ripple, you could not invest in Blockstream. They forced people to choose sides. Schwartz added something important. He said the sad part is, we really are all in this together, and this kind of attitude hurts everyone in the space. But here is the part that changes everything. The same circles that tried to suppress XRP included people connected to Gary Gensler before he became SEC chairman. Emails show Epstein discussed Gensler in 2018, calling him pretty smart and noting he was angling for jobs in Washington. The email was marked "Do not share" or quote. 1 year later, Gensler joined MIT's Media Lab as a senior advisor, despite having no background in blockchain technology. He advised the lab on its digital currency initiative. Then he became SEC chair and launched the lawsuit against Ripple. Documents also revealed that Senator Elizabeth Warren's office coordinated testimony with the SEC before Gary Gensler testified before her committee in 2021. Her staff sent questions in advance with suggested answers. She asked those questions almost verbatim. Coincidence? The XRP community does not think so. Smash that like button if you have been waiting for this truth to come out. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more XRP content. The Epstein files revealed something else that shocked the community. Epstein invested $3 million in Coinbase back in 2014 at a $400 million valuation. The deal was arranged by Tether co-founder Brock Pierce and routed through Shell LLC's. Coinbase co-founder Fred Ursum appears to have been personally aware of the investment. Why does this matter? Because Coinbase was one of the first exchanges to delist XRP after the SEC lawsuit dropped. 8 days after the lawsuit was announced in December 2020, Coinbase suspended trading. They did not wait for a court ruling. They did not support Ripple's fight. They immediately sided with the SEC. But when Coinbase itself got targeted by the SEC for stablecoin yield and futures contracts, suddenly they wanted community support. Suddenly they said the SEC was being unfair. Suddenly they were fighting back. Where was that energy for XRP? The documents show the same players who invested in Coinbase were the same players trying to suppress Ripple. The same networks, the same money, the same agenda. Fred Ursum even attacked Ripple publicly in December 2020, saying Ripple was claiming Bitcoin and Ethereum are Chinese-controlled in a last-ditch effort to save themselves. He took it personally because he knew how true it was. The connections run deep, and now they are all exposed. Here is what the Bitcoin maximalists did not understand. You cannot kill something that actually works. Bitcoin was built to be a store of value. XRP was built to move money. These are fundamentally different use cases. While Bitcoin processes 7 transactions per second, XRP handles 1,500. While Bitcoin costs dollars per transaction, XRP costs fractions of a penny. While Bitcoin takes 10 minutes to settle, XRP settles in 3 to 5 seconds. While Bitcoin mining consumes more electricity than some countries, XRP is carbon neutral. The suppression worked for a while. The SEC lawsuit created 5 years of regulatory uncertainty. Institutions stayed away. Exchanges delisted XRP. The price suffered while Bitcoin and Ethereum reached new highs. But Ripple did not stop building. They did the opposite. They accelerated. They signed over 300 payment partners worldwide. They launched RLUSD, a dollar-backed stablecoin that has already reached 1.3 billion in circulation. They acquired Hidden Road for 1.3 billion, gaining prime brokerage services for institutional clients. They bought Standard Custody to access New York trust licensing. They purchased Rail for cross-border payment infrastructure and GT Treasury for corporate treasury management. Total acquisition spending exceeded $2.7 billion. While everyone else was speculating, Ripple was building real financial infrastructure. And in December 2025, they received conditional approval from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency for a national bank charter. No other crypto-native company has achieved this. The suppression was supposed to destroy Ripple. Instead, it forced them to become unstoppable. Let me explain why the bank charter is massive. Ripple National Trust Bank will have direct access to the Federal Reserve payment system. They applied for a FedMaster account, which would allow them to plug into FedWire and FedNow systems. They could hold dollar reserves directly at the central bank. This is not some minor regulatory approval. This puts Ripple on the same level as major US banks. National bank charters grant federal supervision from the OCC. They provide access to the Federal Reserve's discount window. They allow operation across all 50 states without separate licenses. They enable direct participation in payment systems without intermediaries. Think about what this means for institutional adoption. For years, banks avoided XRP because of regulatory uncertainty. Compliance officers said no. Risk committees said no. Legal teams said no. The SEC lawsuit was the excuse everyone used. Now that excuse is gone. When risk-averse financial institutions see Ripple operating under OCC oversight with Fed access, the compliance concerns disappear. When they see Ripple holding reserves at the central bank, the counterparty risk concerns disappear. When they see federal supervision, the reputation concerns disappear. Analysts at Gemini suggested that if Ripple becomes fully operational as a national bank, XRP could reach $10 to $15 by January 2027 based on utility-driven models. Other analysts project $5 to $8 by late 2026 if both the Clarity Act passes and Ripple secures its Federal Reserve master account. The same regulatory system that was weaponized against XRP is now becoming its greatest advantage. While Ripple was building its banking infrastructure, something else happened. 7 XRP ETFs launched in November 2025 and grabbed $1.14 billion in assets within 6 weeks. That is faster growth than Solana or Ethereum ETFs saw in their first months. The Franklin Templeton XRP ETF, the Bitwise XRP ETF, the Grayscale XRP Trust, the Wisdom Tree XRP Fund, the 21 Shares Core XRP Trust, all now live and trading on major exchanges. These ETFs saw 24 straight days of inflows without a single day of outflows. They locked up 746 million XRP in custody, tightening available supply. The ProShares Ultra XRP ETF launched in July 2025, offering 2 times leveraged exposure. It was the first XRP-linked product available to US investors. The Tellurium 2 times long daily XRP ETF attracted over $150 million in assets and surged 50% in its first month. More ETF applications are pending. The SEC has until March 2026 to make final decisions on multiple spot XRP ETF proposals. Bloomberg analysts estimate 95% approval probability. If you have been paying attention, you know what happens when supply decreases and institutional demand increases. 746 million XRP locked in ETF custody is 746 million XRP that cannot be sold on the open market. Subscribe now if you want to stay ahead of these developments. Drop a comment telling me your XRP price prediction for 2026. The final piece of the puzzle is the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act. This bill would codify XRP's status as a non-security in federal law. It would end the SEC versus CFTC jurisdictional battle that has plagued crypto for years. It would put XRP, Solana, Litecoin, Hedera, Dogecoin, and Chainlink on the same regulatory footing as Bitcoin and Ethereum. The bill hit a roadblock in January 2026 when Coinbase's CEO Brian Armstrong withdrew support over concerns about DeFi restrictions and a regulatory power shift from CFTC to SEC. The Senate Banking Committee markup scheduled for January 15th was postponed, but Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse still calls it a massive step forward. A best-case scenario sees the Clarity Act passed by mid-26. Even if debate extends past the midterms, the direction is clear. Regulatory clarity is coming. The Genius Act already passed in July 2025, creating a federal framework for stablecoins. This allows Ripple to move RLUSD through regulated banking channels with clear rules on reserves and redemptions. When the Clarity Act passes, the final barrier falls. Banks, payment providers, and institutional funds will have no regulatory excuse left. The suppression ends. The adoption begins. Let me bring this full circle. The Epstein files showed us the playbook. Bitcoin maximalists identified Ripple as a threat in 2014. They coordinated to suppress it. They used their connections to MIT Media Lab, to regulators, to exchanges. They succeeded in creating a 5-year SEC lawsuit that cost Ripple hundreds of millions in legal fees and kept institutions away. But they made a critical mistake. They assumed regulation would destroy Ripple. Instead, Ripple embraced regulation. They fought the lawsuit and won, settling for $125 million instead of $2 billion. They built banking relationships while their enemies built memes. They obtained licenses in Europe, Singapore, Dubai, and now the United States. The irony is devastating. The same actors who wanted XRP dead are now watching it become the most regulated crypto asset in America. Coinbase, which delisted XRP immediately after the lawsuit, now competes against a Ripple that has federal bank oversight. Bitcoin, which was supposed to be the only winner, now shares the spotlight with an asset that actually functions as money. Jack Mollers from 21 Capital recently argued that Ripple was lobbying against a Bitcoin-only strategic reserve. He called XRP centralized and corporate-controlled, but when President Trump announced the US Strategic Crypto Reserve would include XRP alongside Bitcoin, the maximalists lost that battle too. The enemies tried to kill XRP by weaponizing regulation. XRP responded by becoming more regulated than anyone imagined possible. That is why they are about to lose everything. 2026 could be the year XRP breaks its all-time high of $3.84 from January 2018, with ETF inflows accelerating, banking infrastructure in place, regulatory clarity on the horizon, and over 803 million XRP now locked in ETF custody. the conditions for a major move are forming. Whether XRP reaches $5, $10, or beyond depends on how quickly these catalysts materialize. One thing is certain, the people who tried to stop XRP failed. The documents are public, the connections are exposed, and we are still here. Smash that like button, comment your thoughts on the Epstein revelations, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. This is just the beginning.